Greetings everyone, I'm Jed Shlackman. I work as a holistic counselor, an energy healer and hypnotherapist, as well as psychotherapist. The current video is one where I'll be speaking about a trendy food. It's something in the health sphere that people have put attention toward, and I want to share a little bit of the science and history surrounding it and how it may help with some physical health concerns and why it may not be for everyone. It's not something that everyone should be out there doing or using. So as a disclaimer at the outset, I'm not presenting this as diagnosis or advice or treatment for anyone's specific health concerns. This video is just for educational purposes. And the food that I'll be focusing on is sauerkraut. And what brought this up at the current time is I was seeing an article posted. It was actually in the Wall Street Journal, and it was an article about the current presidential administration having a number of people who are eating sauerkraut. So it says everyone in Trump's cabinet is eating sauerkraut as a headline. Well, obviously not everyone, but it says here J.D. Vance, RFK Jr., and other officials swear by a diet of grass-fed meat and fermented foods, even when the sulfurous odors cause friction at home. So let's dig a little deeper into what sauerkraut is, why it would be something people would be using in a specialized diet. Sauerkraut is fermented cabbage, so it's a fermented food. The word sauerkraut would translate from German to be sour or fermented cabbage. So this is a traditional food. It's been consumed for hundreds of years throughout parts of Europe, and as a fermented food, it's a food that provides, you could say, somewhat pre-digested food material using bacteria. So it contains what people call probiotics, bacteria that are beneficial in the intestines for helping break down and digest food. So sauerkraut is one food in that category that people have historically used for the benefit of those bacteria to help with digestion. Other foods you may be aware of, or beverages, include things like kimchi, kefir, yogurt, kombucha. So those are all fermented. They all have bacteria that are breaking down those foods or beverage contents, and in that process they're releasing nutrition. In the case of sauerkraut, it's making kind of more bioavailable some of the components of cabbage, such as the sulfur compounds. Cabbage is a cruciferous vegetable, and those are known for having sulforaphane, a sulfur compound, which our body can use to support the liver and detoxification pathways. So people sometimes are using it for that purpose, for helping improve liver function and detoxification. Of course, sulfur is an element that's associated with kind of a strong odor. So if you think of garlic and onions, those also have sulfur compounds, and people are very conscious of those smells. If you think of the cruciferous vegetables like cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower, when people eat those raw, it often creates a lot of gas, and those gases have those sulfur smells when people release it, without going into further detail on that part. So fermented foods are something that have received a lot of attention in the discussion of diets in recent decades. One reason is that a lot of people have disturbances or disruptions to their gut microbiome, to the balance of bacteria there in the intestines, in part due to so much use of antibiotics, but there are also other environmental chemicals that can disrupt the balance of bacteria in the gut. Different infections, of course, can also disrupt the gut. Different psychological stresses and traumas can deplete the energy flow in that area, which also affects the balance of bacteria there. So it's actually energetic, electromagnetic, and electrical fields that are controlling or governing what's happening in our body. So just having psychological stress is going to impact the balance of bacteria there. Taking supplements and probiotics and fermented foods can help with replenishing or rebalancing, but if you don't resolve or address the underlying psychological stresses, the effect may only be temporary. Things may go back toward being out of balance or disturbed. So if you're finding that you have to use probiotics continually or fermented foods continually, you may want to explore deeper layers of healing to get to the root of why your body isn't maintaining its own microbial balance. So in terms of these fermented foods like sauerkraut, the fermented cabbage, there are people using them for therapeutic purposes to help improve digestion or absorption of nutrients. You can think of fermented foods as partially pre-digested foods, so the fermentation process is already started before it goes down through your digestive tract. When we eat non-fermented foods, such as raw foods or regular cooked foods, they go down through our digestive system, and our body is using the microbes in the gut to help break things down and access the nutrients. So our normal digestive process includes fermentation. But when you ferment things, you're creating alcohol, and the alcohol is something the body has to quickly break down and clear out. Otherwise, it accumulates and, in a sense, intoxicates you. There are cases where people, without consuming any alcohol from what they're drinking, just because of the fermentation process of breaking down sugars and carbohydrates and the contents of food, they got, in a sense, drunk in terms of their blood alcohol because their digestive system wasn't functioning properly, and the fermentation producing alcohol led to a buildup of alcohol that created that intoxicated state. They weren't properly quickly clearing out that alcohol product of the fermentation. So fermented foods contain small amounts of alcohol, And a person that's not able to properly, quickly clear out that alcohol would have problems with fermented foods. So some people have health conditions where fermented foods would actually aggravate their condition rather than help improve it. So fermented foods are not advisable for everyone. They can have a therapeutic value for some people, but they could be contraindicated for other people. And there are other ways to help boost your natural microbial balance. Consuming certain types of raw foods, so some raw fruits and vegetables, could actually provide beneficial bacteria. And of course, probiotic supplements where they have a medium to grow the bacteria on, and it's concentrated in a supplement where you don't have the fermented byproduct of alcohol in those capsules or tablets. That's a different way to boost your beneficial bacteria. So you can use those types of foods and products if fermented foods are not beneficial or safe for you to consume. It's also worth considering that something that's therapeutic in the short term that could help rebalance things for the short term, if you continue to use it consistently long term, it might lead toward an imbalance. So you don't necessarily want to continue indefinitely on that same diet, a diet with those fermented foods, for example. Over time, it might not be supporting balance. It might actually lead towards some imbalance in the long term. So people are using pretty restrictive diets sometimes. In this case, it was mentioned by the Wall Street Journal. People are using this keto carnivore type diet and including fermented foods as part of that diet. Interestingly, in the past, the sauerkraut trend was something that had been associated with a more vegan or vegetarian diet going back to the 1960s. You had Ann Wigmore, who founded the Hippocrates Institute, which focused on using a lot of living foods, raw foods, vegan and vegetarian foods to help people heal from different major illnesses and chronic illnesses. So it was kind of like a health resort or health spa, specializing in using foods such as wheatgrass and sprouts and sauerkraut and raw fruits and vegetables. So their sauerkraut was used as part of a more vegan or vegetarian oriented diet, and the trend that's being highlighted currently is one where people using more of the low carb, keto, meat and carnivore oriented diets are including sauerkraut and other fermented foods as part of what they're consuming that they think is ideal for their health. So sauerkraut is something that people might consume on a variety of diets. It's not just keto, it's not just vegetarian. Any diet that you're using, fermented foods could be included as a component of it. And as I pointed out, the fermentation has both potential benefits and drawbacks. It kind of pre-digests food to make it more bioavailable in terms of the nutrition. And you could think of how in nature you'll see some animals where the animal will chew and eat some food and then spit it out or regurgitate it for their offspring to consume, since the offspring haven't developed their digestive system enough yet to digest it on their own. So the parent is helping that baby get the nutritional benefit by first partially digesting it themselves and then spitting it out into the mouth of the baby for the baby to consume it. So that's a pre-digestion of the food in that sense. So fermented foods provide a similar benefit. They're allowing the bacteria to start breaking down that food before you ingest it, so the nutrients are already somewhat more available than if you just consumed it raw. Since the bacteria breaking it down produces alcohol, you are ingesting a certain amount of alcohol, certainly not the concentration that's in most alcoholic beverages, but it's enough to have a potential effect if you can't quickly eliminate, you can't quickly break down and detoxify that alcohol. Alcohol is something that's very toxic to our body, and even small amounts can present problems. Some of you may be familiar with the writings and speaking of the medical medium Anthony William. He talks about helping people with chronic illnesses heal, and he always discourages any alcohol consumption if you're trying to heal from those serious chronic illnesses. If your liver is already compromised, if your ability to handle toxins is already limited, you don't want to add an additional toxin, in particular alcohol, since that's putting extra stress on your system. So even alcohol in the tiny amounts that might be used for, let's say, preserving an herbal tincture, he would recommend against that. He would tell people to use vegetable glycerin as the medium for an herbal tincture rather than something with any alcohol in it. So he would discourage any fermented foods also for people with chronic illnesses based on that concern about the alcohol. Certainly the probiotic content might help some people, especially people with gut issues fueling their chronic illness, but you can boost up and build the probiotics in other ways without consuming something fermented. So that would be a case of caution in terms of using fermented foods such as sauerkraut. For those that are interested in holistic health and healing the body, mind, and spirit, I invite you to visit my website, phinsights.com. That's phinsights.com. You'll find information about healing services that I facilitate, and also many different links and resources for education and learning more about different holistic health topics. For now, I'd like to wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.